All right, well, welcome to Programming with Puppetry. I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Nicole Brown, along with her puppet friends, Dr. Duck and Brary Bear. She conducts a weekly story time for the children of McCracken County Public Library. And now I'm going to turn things over to Nicole and her friends. So she can go ahead and get started, tell you a little bit more about herself. And just as a reminder for those of us, or for those who joined just a little bit afterwards, she would like our questions as they come out. So feel free to unmute and shout them out as questions occur to you. And if for some reason you can't unmute, feel free to put your question in the chat, and I will be more than happy to shout out your question for you. All right, Nicole, take it away.
Take it away. All I got for you is hooray for story time, hooray. Not really much to say because I personally have just been doing this as a service to my community for the last 10 years and never knew any different. Living here in Paducah, this story time has always had puppets. My mentor, Retta Folsom, is a puppet. She doesn't like it when I call her a puppet master. That doesn't sound right, but she is the one that taught me about using puppets for story time, because that was her natural passion. But lovingly, I have to tell you, these puppets are older than I am. She had made them in 1971 to utilize, again, puppetry in story time. I'm sure it was inspired, as she's told me before, through the ages that we all grew up with Sesame Street, right? And even the use of puppetry to speak to children, like Mr. Rogers using puppets as well. But definitely Dr. Duck, and if you can see behind me here, Lady Dragon behind her castle, have been here long before I was even coming to story time. Personally, I didn't go to story time as a young child, but my husband did. And is everybody hearing me okay?
And say,
Anybody?
I hear you.
Okay. It's kind of a funny thing to look at a blank screen. Thank you for anybody to respond to. I'm just kind of looking at a blank screen, so I don't have any reaction if this is working or not. So thank you.
That's definitely understandable.
Yeah. But personally, I started coming to story time as a mother. They had, you know, this going on for a long time, obviously, but it was a blessing for me as a new mother, especially not knowing what to do to interact with my kid any more than just, you know, the general care of them. So having the opportunity to come here every week with my kid and have that on our rhythm, our weekly rhythm, was very helpful. Then she even transitioned into you know, a Mother's Day out kind of mini preschool, and they in the neighborhood, and they even still to this day bring all of their kids to story time. So it's been a part of our life. And finally, when I guess, I don't know, at one point I realized logically there's a beautiful institution of this library in McCracken County, and knew that I needed to be out in the public, you know, doing some kind of service besides my own job privately. So the library was the best institution I thought to support, and what better to support than other parents, new parents wanting that same encouragement that I needed at that time. So I just ended up understudying with Miss Retta Folsom, and it just came. The puppets came that with story time. So it's nothing that I have created any more than I've had to learn myself. The main thing that we use the puppets for, I personally try to incorporate them in every story time. So I format the story times to be the same pattern every time. That's not necessarily what had been happening. I think that the puppets would make a debut with different things that they wanted to present, but I personally decided I think it was helpful to have the puppets, particularly, as you already mentioned, Dr. Duck. Hello, story timers, is what he would sound like. And Lady Dragon. Hello, children, it is I, your musical librarian, Lady Dragon. And Brary Bear doesn't have a voice right now, which is fine because it's good for us to see quiet and very attentive. Look how attentive he looks. Presence. And two, that sometimes it's okay. You don't have to be loud or make noise. You can just be an observer, just like Brary Bear. And then, of course, as you see over in the tree over yonder here, there's even a squirrel and a rabbit, but the squirrel usually just goes, and there's a puppet wall with a hole behind it. His job is to remind us to change the season wheel and to pay attention to the changes of we're lucky to have seasons here, so we can dialogue about that. But definitely, it's been, I don't know, it's been a blessing for me because it's kept me creative and doing things outside of my normal life, and especially doing the puppets. I'll admit was very intimidating at first, but it's kind of hilarious how seeing those puppets at a certain time, every time in story time, so that the younger kids, like the babies in their mom's lap, and even the older kids that's usually never older than 5 if there's homeschool kids, but they're expecting to see those puppets pop up. The first thing we do is visit with Brary Bear. He comes up and brings in his backpack the books that he's chosen. And that's kind of the beginning of it. We have 3 books and intersperse a visit with Lady Dragon and a visit with, actually, Mr. Radio is not a puppet, but we turn on some music to wiggle as well. And then Dr. Duck at the end presents a color sheet for the parents, the child to take home, for the parents to continue dialoguing with them as a obvious beginning literacy practices. And they have a color sheet that actually turns into an envelope if you guys want to see that. And they come back and deliver it in the old school mailbox. There's no mail in here. I should probably put the flag down. But definitely, it's been fun, for lack of a better word. When I'm in the midst of it, preparing for it is probably, as you know, the hardest work, and visualizing how it's going to look or be accepted or enjoyed by the children. It's kind of like you just find out when it's happening, if it's working or not. But I will say with the puppets, it's a bit of a challenge. I always have to have an assistant out front because obviously I'm behind the wall. I can't see what their reaction is, so I have to rely on my assistant to let me know everything's working out okay or not, and we kind of do a little debriefing afterwards to find out what worked or what didn't work. So doing the puppets behind the wall, the big puppets, is a pretty big endeavor, obviously, but the simplest way that I would utilize puppets, not necessarily even bringing them to life with a particular personality, voice, but like the squirrel, I don't have to give him a voice, as you heard me say, just and bringing, like his book that we use where he gets to really go around the puppet wall, is this book called The Busy Little Squirrel. So in the pit, we have, I say the pit, that's where we collect all of our stuff in the pit.
Nicole, I'm going to pause real quick. And could you adjust? I think what we're hearing the feedback is the microphone brushing against your shirt, because it was
Oh,
fine for a lot, but then when you started moving around again,
yeah.
so maybe try a
Repeat.
different position on your shirt, or something to help with the static. Um,
Okay. Yeah, that's literally, this microphone is through the speakers on, in this room. So I'm more than happy to move it, but it's not attached to the iPad at all. It's just in the room. And if it seems to be a little bit too much, I can literally turn it off and use my voice just now. You don't hear any extra buzz. Is that true?
no, we're still hearing it. We
Yeah.
thought that maybe it
So
was your the
it's
mic
not the
against your shirt, so
lingo,
it's.
it's just the room itself or the iPad or the hum of electricity. I don't know. I'm so sorry that I don't have any solution for that obnoxious buzz. And I'm more apologizing to the recording because I'm sure that's not going to be very fun. Um, I feel like I don't necessarily know what is wanted for other storytime presenters because, again, I don't know any different than this. This is the way that I've always thought storytime was. I'm kind of surprised to find out that other libraries don't do it the way we do it. So I would love to hear if anybody has any questions to help them feel inspired about doing any of the puppetry.
I have a question. When
Yes,
you are choosing your weekly theme or the books
yeah.
that you're going to use, how much influence does, because I know what they can't see, but what I've seen is you have some friends in the room there behind you as well, in addition to Dr. Duck and Brary Bear. How much does the puppets influence what you select to do each week, and how much of it is driven by what you do with the puppets driven by the theme that you've chosen or the books that you've chosen?
Well, particularly for fun, I don't pick the books. Brary does, so I blame it all on him first of all, to the children. But the idea is the way that I would pick them isn't driven by the things that I have. The way that I pick the book is driven based on simplicity. Like for instance, in this book, um, there's dialogue of animals mostly. I would say that's mostly what I work with is animals. If there's any people in the story, I would dress up, or my assistant would dress up, or even Brary Bear would dress up. So I'm more motivated by the story coming to life. And if that book, I can visualize it coming to life, acting it out. And again, that's the intention, again, for the families to think about taking a book and acting it out and getting your stuffies out, getting clothes out, changing into the character, make the setting. So it's more driven by, is the book able to come to life? I don't do every book come to life. Some books I'm just using as a literal um, practice reading. Sometimes the first book is Brary is asking us to repeat after, to practice reading to Brary. So I would say, everyone repeat after me. Leaves were falling. The air was getting cold. Leaves were falling. The air was getting cold. And we'd say, oh, look, this squirrel's half of his body's off the page, or something like that. And I'd say, oh, well, I have a squirrel that I have in my collection of little plushies. Um, and that would be exciting. Oh, and there's an apple tree in the setting, so I'd make sure to put apples out on our great-grandfather silver tree, who we have the leaves change with the season, and sometimes just add random stuff, like stuff's in the tree, depending on the book. And then in regards to after the first book, we go to Lady Dragon. I mean, that's the formatting, and then Lady Dragon pops up in the midst of my assistant has a cart of books that are to the theme of the day, so that the busy parents, right, don't have to go look for books to check out. We already have books that are in that same theme, if you will, to dialogue, so they can take those books and check them out. So my assistant's talking about those books while I slip in the back, get into Lady Dragon, and she comes up and says, "Hello, children, let's sing today." For instance, on her board here now is just the solfege, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and we would sing that song with her. After Lady Dragon, I would try to make the song sort of go with what we were talking about, but it doesn't always have to. Sometimes it's just literally a musical exercise, so that, again, another variation of literacy, singing, as you know, and introducing maybe, quote, another language, a music language of communication with rhythm. And then after that, we'll do another book. That's when usually the assistant is already out front, so they do another book. And then after that, I said we do a little wiggle movement with Mr. Radio, and then do our last book. And then after the last book, we get excited and have a story house. I guess I could be kind and get you that. I know that the folks that have been here before know this big old puppet pit back here, but after every story, we put the little characters in here into a house. So we've collected it over the year. By the time we're finished with the year, we see how many books we've actually read with all the characters in the house. And then finally, in the midst of my assistant doing all that, Dr. Duck pops up and interrupts usually. I think last week he accidentally interrupted the last character, and I didn't get that in the book. But he has a doctor bag, because he's a doctor of letters. Again, this was created by Retta Folsom, so I'm just carrying on the tradition, if you will. And he has usually a stamp collection that he's been, this season we have stamps on the envelope. I told you about there was a color sheet that turns into an envelope, right? But the color sheet itself, we put little Brary's face on there, and the children get to write. Well, if they can't write, obviously, their parents, we encourage them to dictate it. And then they have a little coloring sheet and maybe a question at the bottom. It says, Brary Bear, what do you see? Kind of idea for them to continue talking about what we had done in the storytime presentation. And then they fold it up and put it in the mailbox when they come to the next story time. And the mail is in there, and we collect it the next week. We'll pull them out and look at it. So they've gotten, sort of elementally, Lady's always bringing some music. Dr. Duck is always bringing some kind of form of letters. He is doctor of letters or words, and practicing coloring again, or writing if they're old enough to write. So they get that as well. So discerning which way do I go, it's all inspired by the book. And like you've heard me say, what their jobs are, I would just interject whatever is the theme of that day. Like that one was about painting and what do you see, and the interpretation of paintings. I think that story time in my head had to do with the beautiful phenomenon of children, my child's particular. I'm sorry, I'm remembering my little kid when I first was encouraging them to draw. She had the biggest moment of anxiety, and I didn't understand. I mean, she's only 3 years old. What's the big deal with drawing something? And she specifically was mad because it doesn't look like a tree. And I had to explain to myself when I started doing story time what could I have done better for her. And one of it was discussing that, of course, it doesn't look like a tree. It's a symbol of the tree. And also TREE is a symbol of a tree. It doesn't have to be, it's a tool to point to reality, not reality. So words, symbolism like the I found that was interesting. So we were discussing art interpretation. So whatever the child, I don't know if you've ever looked at a child's sheet and say, oh, it looks like a turkey, and they say, it's a dog, just say, well, what is it? So, what do you see is what we were talking about in that story time. So I don't know how else to explain. This is how my brain works, mostly motivated about a perspective of a child, their attention span especially, and maybe their struggles of learning, beginning their literacy with life, and interpretation of people's feelings and thoughts. So a lot of social, emotional kind of way of looking at the books too, trying to figure out something that is, I don't know, across the board, normal, I guess is what I'm getting. I'm not looking for any fantastical presentation any more than just being with a kid. And mostly I've noticed being inspired by the natural world. Obviously, pretending with puppets is a big deal for kids when they get older. Sometimes it's scary when they're little, especially when they pop up and surprise, but that's kind of the element of keeping their engagement, of looking, and of course doing it the same every time will become comforting, and they're anticipating it, so their brain is getting used to patterns. But lovingly, the kids that are older crack me up. They say, well, that's Miss Nicole back there. And then I come out and they say, you were Lady Dragon. I said, no, I'm Miss Nicole. Lady Dragon's Lady Dragon. And yes, I made her, animate, because we're just having fun imagining. Obviously, squirrels don't talk, and ducks don't talk. I always was kind of concerned about all that personally. But it's cultivating imagination and the power of our imagination, even as adults, of redirecting our thoughts is, to be more productive. As well as I do, we can imagine a lot of scary things, especially if we have children, and that's not productive. It's not productive in our breath, being relaxed and being with a child. So even cultivating, I think, in the adults to remember the use of our imagination is very healthy, and utilize it in a productive way. If I can be so bold to say that. And I try to encourage, I don't just talk to the kids here, I'm talking to the adults as well. Sometimes I have to school the adults more than I school the children, but definitely to be more understanding if the child is scared of the puppets, or whatever, I don't bring them out. I have brought the puppets that are really big, like we have a big lion you can dress up in with a hat that my mentor made. And one time I did that, and I didn't see that one of those families freaked out, and I never saw them again. So I kind of have to keep it a little bit working with what the audience is able to tolerate too. But ultimately, there's a regular pattern every week, and mostly picking books that are not too complicated. Back in the day when we had older kids, we could have longer stories, but this is pretty quick moving through a format, and it's about 45 minutes straight of content, but the lingering of getting everybody in the beginning, dialoguing about last week through the color sheet that we've collected, and then introducing any housekeeping things or any events that are coming up that eventually they're here for an hour. But again, it's challenging when you have multiple ages, and of course families are going to have maybe a baby on their lap bringing their toddler to story time. So that's the other inspiration of making sure it's formatted regularly so that there can be, a parent with two different age children that maybe they'll stay engaged longer. So just like children, you guys, are you engaged? Did you have anything else for me? I'm not going to babble anymore until you guys give me something to babble about.
So, you said that a lot of the puppets that uh, were already here when you started doing the programs. Can you tell anyone in here today that maybe doesn't use puppets regularly or may not have a selection? Do you know of any good places they might consider looking into getting puppets if they want to start incorporating them a little more into their story time?
Well, honestly, the companies, I don't know, but Folk Manus is the main one that this particular puppet I've noticed. They've been around for a long time, and it literally is a puppet. I'm sure they have plushies too, but I'm not quite sure. The Are you familiar with Folk Manus? This is the word. I don't know if you can even see the word Folk Manus. Yes. But those are pretty high quality items and definitely can, um, last a long time. So that's been nice. Those are some of the puppets that were already here to bring a story to life. But particularly love the Dr. Duck and Lady Dragon were handmade. So they're unique, and so is Brer. He's a bear that was standing, but he's two of them put together to make this body. So that's the other thing I have to admit. I don't know how to make puppets, but I'm sure you could look on, I don't know, somewhere in the world, but definitely these were made, like I said, a couple of years before I was even born. So I'm in charge of taking care of them, keeping them up on their maintenance. I have to call their creator if I need some sincere good work on them. But otherwise, Folk Manus is a good source. I'm not familiar with any other sources. Again, you can take any, oh my goodness. The other thing, as I said, so you're going to be mad at me for saying the puppet master. I don't know what else to call it. But Retta said she's taken, plushies and cut holes in them. There's so many surgeries back here. She's cut holes in them so you can put your hand in it and just so it's secure so it won't unravel. But definitely you can take any of the, a good plush animal and turn it into something that you can put your hand in. Sometimes she would, do surgery and make a mouth, but I'm not feeling that confident for some reason. I just don't like cutting on these cute little things sometimes. But that's one other option that has we have a lot that we use for that. I think even one of these chickens is cracking me up. I think I have a chicken. Yeah, the chicken's pretty funny. Yeah, she cut a hole in it. Yeah, she cut a hole in that too. So I just put an egg in the chicken. So there's always an egg in the chicken. Here's another puppet she that's made. It's a foam core. Yeah. Hello. This is Jacqueline. Um, she's just as old as everybody else as well. You can see she's got some wear and tear. But yeah, I'm telling you, I didn't make them. I would be just like you, probably wanting to purchase off Folk Manus. Um, and again, those are inspired by your books. You see a book and then you maybe get one of those brushes.
Nicole, I just wanted to mention that you can see how much love is in your setting there and all the puppets, and it's just amazing. But I wanted to ask you, is there a book or one or two books that you get excited when you know it's time for that book, a book that's always a hit, and you just know it's gonna work well?
Well, there's several of them. And I think the ones that I'm thinking of are not puppets. They're more of acting them out, like, doing acting class. Of course, the Three Little Bears, Paul Galdon's version, we brought Goldilocks to life by costuming, but we don't necessarily have any puppets with that. The Busy Little Squirrel was one that I really liked, but again, I'm basing that off of our puppet wall. I'm not quite sure if you understand uh, and that's what I understand. Not every library has a big old puppet wall to work behind, but I really enjoyed that one. I did create that one, and I was excited about it. It worked well, and I could even hear um, parents in the background saying, "Oh my goodness, this is so wonderful." To be quite honest, that made me happy. So I'm looking forward to doing that one next week, because the setting is, the squirrels going here and there to different parts, as you would see a squirrel do. But I'm behind the wall with a squirrel as the reader out front is reading. He's going through all the different places, all through the different places that are in the book, as an example. And then I don't know. I mostly, to be quite honest, get excited about the skits more so than the puppetry. And again, I'm always excited about Lady Dragon and Dr. Duck being here, every time. That's really, it comforts me as well, because I know that they're going to have to do something, so I don't have to overthink it. I have to find something for them to do. Um, Let me think, is there another book off the top of my head that's been fun bringing to life? Well, like anytime, last week we did Old MacDonald, um, Jane Cabrera, um, which was hilarious that she starts it out with Old MacDonald had a wife. I'm assuming it's kind of bouncing off of, or she was coming off of Farmer in the Dell, and changed it up a little bit. Um, but each time too, like, these puppets can be held for each animal that comes up, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm we had a dog, and we have a dog, but inviting a child to come up to participate, and then they can put their hand in the puppet, which they don't usually, they just hold it, and ruff, ruff here and ruff, ruff there, and can participate. And I think that, as far as the puppets, using something that you might be able to do into your story times, is being able to have some interaction. And because they're soft and safe, you can let the kids hold them. And of course, you got a Lysol later. No, I'm just kidding. Well, maybe not, depends. But lining all the animals up from Old MacDonald is nice. And even at the end, it says, something like, Old MacDonald had a farm, and what he heard was a wolf, wolf here and wolf, wolf there. And you just put your hand over each child that has to animate the puppet, and then the audience participation that's still out there is obviously singing along. I really do enjoy that. I always can feel confident that it's going to work pretty well when a child is invited to come up and hold the animals. And I think there was 8 of them, so you get a good handful of people get a chance to try it out. Not everybody wants to, nor is maybe sometimes you have enough people in your story time, but it's still a fun way to interact. Maybe 1 or 2 of them you could do. I know I feel really challenged to think of what else you guys would have to deal with. I don't know what your libraries are like. I am completely and utterly aware that I'm spoiled here and didn't even know that I was. Actually, I went to
So,
Nashville. Nashville has a pretty awesome story time.
for those, maybe someone's sitting in the session right now and they're thinking, this just looks amazing, but either my library's small, I don't have,
Yeah.
they're kind of thinking of all different reasons why maybe they wouldn't be able to do this. or maybe they're really excited about it. What's one piece of advice that you would have for someone sitting in the session or someone watching the recording of, to get started, why they should do it and what, they should keep in mind as they get things started, incorporating more puppetry into their story time?
Well, the big takeaway, I wouldn't even say advice of how you should or shouldn't do it as much as it gives you a little bit of freedom, I guess, than having to be the only person, bringing this book to be entertaining to a kid. When you pull out this little puppet and make it, say, get out of it or whatever, that is kind of being your helper, if you will, to engage the children visually. They're going to want to track that's a healthy thing to recognize. They're going to track it better versus this two-dimensional book. So I guess my big takeaway is to encourage you to at least have little stuffed animals, and I'm sure you do already on some level, but to animate them out of the book, making them have a squeaky voice or whatever. It's just a little bit more engaging for the child, to have something three-dimensional pop out of the book, if you will. So I would encourage that. And the main thing that my mentor always said, you know, this just look at a child's eyes. It's not about you being an entertainer or creating something that's fantastic and you're a star of a show. No, you're thinking of being the child, and somewhat empathizing with the parent or the adult that's with them, giving them even ideas of how to take a book and bring it to life so that they practice talking with you or playing and whatnot. They're already naturally going to want to play with their toys. As you remember, as a child, you made your toy, even a crayon became, something that talked when I was a kid, or a car. There's so many things going on with our child brain. So think of a child and how much more engaging they would feel about the story. Therefore, they might want to read that book again. So that's where I would say inspire you to do that for the child. And again, the idea for the adults as well, to be able to bring a book to life. Yes.
Okay. We have a question from one of the participants. She asked, is it necessary to hide your own mouth when controlling a puppet, or does it not matter? I always feel like I'll look silly speaking for the puppet.
That's a great question, and I have thought about that myself. I don't know if you recall, and I apologize if it's not a good example for you personally, but do you remember Mr. Rogers never hid his mouth? He wasn't a ventriloquist. Obviously, it was on TV and they could zoom in, but at any time, the child is going to look at the puppet. The older child would be trying to figure out who's doing it. That's normal. We're not trying to trick any child. We're just wanting to suspend our imagination, and it is natural for a child to be able to do that. The smart aleck big kid might say, "You're making it talk." And one of my favorite things that Miss Retta says with her, we used to have a different mascot, which was her puppet. That she is a ventriloquist. She can do it with her mouth closed, or with her mouth just kind of half closed, smiling. I don't think that's necessary. In fact, when you're moving this around, when I'm saying, "Hey, can you think about what I'm doing? You see my mouth moving, but you're going to look at the squirrel, because it's moving more so." As a child, they're going to look at that too, and it's fun. You're not trying to trick anybody. You're just wanting to bring a book to life. Again, that's our main point, is to inspire the love of reading, the love of books, and this is just enhancing that. So I wouldn't be shy about hiding your mouth. In fact, it's very entertaining if you try to hide that you're the one talking, but you'll do your best, but it's still fun. Yeah, I guess main thing, don't take things too seriously. You're just providing inspiration. And it's probably, I always think if I'm ever embarrassed, if I should do it this way or that way, or professionally, this, that, and the other, I'd be like, these are children. Um, they're they're forgiving and playful. So just enjoy being with them. Yeah, I guess it's called letting go of our little ego and just being a child ourselves too.
She said, I forgot that Mr. Rogers didn't do ventriloquism. Thank you for the reassurance.
Yeah, totally. Good.
Well, we're kind of winding up at this, winding things down. Do you have any final words of wisdom or final thoughts that you would like to share with our attendees as we're wrapping things up?
Well, the only thing I say, remember when you look out at the children and you look into their eyes, focus on that versus focusing on you and how you're doing it right or wrong. Just do it for the love of their little brains. They're going to grow up and be adults in the world too. This is a very precious time too with their adults they're with. Support them and the love that they're trying to feel, in a new community, raising a kid. At your library, you are a place that is welcoming to all and supporting them in their transitions in life, no matter where it is. But with story time and the young families with their new children, you're doing a very big service for not just them, for your own community. So definitely try to think on that bigger picture, that you are cultivating future community members and wanting them to feel safe in their community and loved and appreciated by wanting to help them learn about the world. And that's what we're here to do as library service providers in our community. I hope that's encouraging to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. I find the passion and love that you have for this service that you do for the community is very apparent, and I find it very inspiring. I'm going to, if no one else has any other questions, then I'm going to put up our slide that reminds everybody that KDLA is partially funded by the Institute for Museum and Library Services and through the Library Services and Technology Act. So we always want to make sure that we, give them acknowledgement and props. And don't forget that everyone will be back at 10 o'clock for the next session. So thank you, Nicole.
You're so welcome. Thank you too, Amber. Bye-bye, everybody.